Story number 10, The Princess's New Clothes. After their mothers went back, Ajji took all the children on a shopping spree. They went to the biggest cloth store in the town. Ajji had filled her purse with notes and told all the 7 children, "Each of you can buy one dress. It is our gift to you. Remember, I have rupees 500 for each of you to buy one dress." At the store, she chose a nice comfortable chair. The children were allowed to decide which clothes they wanted in which color. They could go on the trial room, try them out before buying. After an hour, everybody had whatever they want except Krishna. She had tried on many dresses but found fault with all of them. She told Ajji, "This store does not have anything nice for me. Shall we go to another store?" "What is wrong with this one? It is a well-known store," Ajji remarked. But Krishna pouted and complained that she had all the colors and cuts available here, so everyone trooped off to the next shop. There too, after a lot, finally Krishna chose her dress. Ajji had been watching all this with her typical soft smile. On the way back, as they piled into the taxi, she whispered to Krishna, "It's good to you to choose a final dress, but be aware, or else you may turn out to be like that princess." "Which princess, Ajji?" the children asked. "The one in the story." Ajji was looking out of the window. "Tell us! Oh, tell us!" So Ajji told them a story of the princess who never liked any of her clothes. Story. The king and the queen of Ullas were sad. No one were attacking them. The subjects were happy. The farmer had grown a bumper crop. Then why are they so sad? Because they longed for a child and did not had one. One day they learned of a palace in the forest, which in the kingdom, where if you prayed hard and well, you were granted your wish. They went there and for many days prayed to the goddess of the forest. Finally, their prayers were heard and the goddess appeared before them and asked what they wished for. The king and queen bowed low and said, "We wish to have a child." "So be it. You will have a little girl," said the goddess, shimmering in the greenery. "But remember, though she will be a loving child, she will be having one flaw. She will love new clothes too much and it will make life difficult for you. Do you still want such a child?" King and queen wanted a baby so much that they would have agreed to anything. So the goddess granted them their wish and vanished back among the tree. Soon, as they had been said, the queen gave birth to a lovely baby girl. Oh, what a beauty the little thing was! With her jet black hair and thick eyelashes and long toes and fingers. They named her Beena. The kingdom rejoiced in their king happiness for a while. There was complete joy everywhere. Beena grew up a child and loved by everyone. She became prettier by the day. With her charming manners and ready laughter, she fills everyone's heart with joy. But as the goddess had said, she had one flaw. She loved new clothes. She loved clothes so much that she had to have a new outfit every day. She would refuse to wear the same clothes twice. Tailors from all over the kingdom, even outside, created beautiful, extraordinary clothes for her. Silk, cotton, wool, you name it. And Beena had a dress or sari of that material. Blues, greens, reds, pinks, every color in the nature was presented in her wardrobe. For a while, the king and queen were happy to let her have new clothes every day. But soon they realized they were spending all their money and time finding new tailors and clothes for their daughter. This had to stop. They coaxed and cajoled, pleaded and scolded, but Beena remained unmoved. Her parents understood that this was the flaw that goddess had warned about them, and finally decided Beena to send to the goddess to find a solution. Beena entered the dark green forest and waited for the god to appear. She came in a flash of green light which lit up everything around her. Folding her hands, Beena told Goddess why she had came. I know your problem, my child. I will send you a new outfit every day. It will be unique, its color and design will delight you. But you should remember one thing. You cannot wear anything else or exchange these clothes with anyone. If you ever do that, your life would be miserable for every time. Happily, Beena agreed to this. After all, why would she be unhappy if she got a new dress every day? From then on, Beena woke up each morning to find an extraordinary new sari or dress lying by her bed, ready to be worn. It was a dream come true for her. She enjoyed herself no end, choosing matching earrings and bangles and shoes, and everyone kept telling how pretty she looked. Yet after some months, the excitement died down. No one remarked when Beena chased in wearing another fantastic dress. Oh, it's the goddess gift, they all said. It's not something you or I can ever have. All her friends said and shrugged and went their way. Beena grew sad. Then one festival day, while walking near the river, she noticed a girl wearing a simple cotton sari. There was something about that the girl walked and how attractive she looked, which made everyone turn and stare. Beena noticed how she looked, which made everyone turn and stare. Beena noticed how the people were admiring the girl. She became jealous because no one noticed her beautiful clothes any longer. Yet they had such praise for simply dressed girl. She forgot all about goddess warning and went up to the girl and said, Will you take my dress and give me your sari in return? It's so lovely that people can't take their eyes off. The girl was astonished. The famous Princess Beena was offering to take her sari and was giving her a marvelous outfit in exchange. She could not believe her luck and happily gave the sari to Beena. She wore Beena's dress and went away. No sooner Beena worn the girl's sari than there was a flash and a bang. Her surroundings once changed and she found herself transported deep inside the forest in front of the goddess. Beena! The goddess called, I had told you that you can't give away or exchange the cloth I gave you, but you have just done that. I am afraid there is punishment for not listening to me. I will have to take you away from the world of humans forever. Beena looked down in sadness. She thought of her parents' tear-stained face, the grief of the people in her kingdom who had loved her dearly. Then she spoke aloud, I will go away, but do grant me one last wish. Turn me into something that will remind everyone about their beloved princess, something they find may even useful. The goddess smiled and turned Beena into a plant. Do you know what plant Beena had become? An onion. Have you noticed how onion has so many layers? All those layers are dresses that Beena once wore. And have you noticed your mother's eye water while she cuts onion? That is because, unknown to ourselves, like all the people in Beena's kingdom, we still shed tears for the beautiful, kind-hearted princess. After listening to the story, Krishna wailed, Ajji, I don't want to be like Beena. I don't want to get turned into onion. I promise not to fuss over my clothes from now. Story number 11. The Story of Pan. Vishnu Kaka had invited the entire family for dinner. It was a lavish meal with many courses. Everyone ate their fill, enjoying each dish. After it was over, the children gathered around Kaka as he brought out his big box of pan. They loved watching Kaka choose and mix his ingredient to make a delicious pans, which grown-ups then ate with blissful look on their face. He explained to the children, a pan contains betel leaf, betel nut and the lime, but we should use only so much of each ingredient. Only then it will taste good. All 7 children wanted to try this experiment of their own. Some of them chewed only the leaf, some on the nuts, and some on the nut and the leaf, or the leaf and only lime. It was true, when the 3 were not put together, the pan tasted horrible. In fact, Sharan vomited when he added more lime than necessary. Everyone made a beeline for the mirror to check if their tongues were red or not. Ajis was sitting and chatting with Sharon's mom and watching their antics. Then she called out to them and said, "Children, by this time you must all know that the leaf, nut, or lime on their own taste very bad. Even if you put just two together, it is not good. Only when you add three in a perfect combination can a pan be eaten. And that's when you get that red color in the mouth." "Why is that, Aji? Is there any special meaning?" "Yes, there is a special meaning. I'll tell you the story which I heard first from my grandmother." The story. Once upon a time, there were two brothers, Bhanu and Veer. Their parents died when they were young, and Bhanu brought up his younger brother with a lot of love and care. When Bhanu was old enough, he married a girl named Bharati. She was such a gentle, loving person and looked after Veer with as much love as her husband. When Veer was about 20 years of the age, he heard that his king was looking for soldiers to join the army, that their king was going to fight a battle. Veer decided to join the army. Oh, how much his brother and sister-in-law cried and pleaded, telling him to remain at home with them. They could not bear the thought of the boy they had brought up with so much affection going so far away from them. But Veer insisted on becoming a soldier, so they let him go away. With a heavy heart and tears in their eyes, for many days there was no news of Veer. The king went to war, vanished his enemy, and returned. The soldiers who went with him also came back home, but of Veer there was no sign. Day after day, his brother and sister-in-law watched out for him, hoping to see him come walking down the road back home. But there was no one. Then one day, a group of soldiers passed through the village, returning from home of the war. Bhanu called out of them and said about his brother, "Viru? Oh yes, so sad. He died, in the battlefield," said one, shaking his head. No, he was injured and he recovered. Did he not come home?" said another. "He was on his way home when he fell ill," informed a third. On hearing these awful tidings, Bhanu was deeply saddened. He decided he could not live at home waiting for his dear little brother for return. He went and look for him. When he told his wife Bharati, too decided to go with him. Together they set off one day to look for the missing Veer and bring him home. They decided to go to the site of the king's big battle where Veer was last seen by his companions. This place was far away and they had to travel through forest, valleys, mountains, and deserts. The two walked over many miles, but poor Bharti was not strong enough. One day, after traveling through a thick forest, they reached to a little hamlet. Bharti sat down, exhausted. Then, to Bhanu's great horror, she died of sheer exhaustion. Unable to bear his grief, Bhanu too died immediately. Over many years at the place where the couple died, two trees grew. One was tall and tall tree, and the other a creeper that hugged the tree. It was as if Bharti and Bhanu were together even in death. Meanwhile, Veer, the brother they had loved so deeply, not really dead. He had got terribly wounded in the war and spent many years recovering from his injury back in a little village far away from his home. When he finally recovered, he could to his old house, knowing how anxious his family would be for him. But imagine his surprise when he found the house locked and bolted and abandoned for many years. Slowly, the neighbors also gathered and told them how Bhanu decided to go looking for his lost brother. Bhanu had decided to go looking for his lost brother. That night, Veer cried many bitter tears. How would he find his beloved brother and sister-in-law now? Where were they? By the time morning dawned and he had made up his mind, he would try and go at the ways they have travelled and find them. Immediately he set off. Veer was a soldier, but he had only lately recovered from many wounds and wasn't too strong. It took him many days to walk across the different land, but Bhanu and his wife had crossed. Then one day, near the forest, he came across a little shrine. The villagers told him the sad story how the shrine came to be. Years ago, a couple had arrived at the spot tired from the days walking. The legend had it they were on the way for looking for his lost young brother. When the two died without fulfilling the wish, two wonderful plants, unknown to anyone earlier, had grown at the spot. The leaves and the nut from the tree were so sweet and refreshing that villagers decided to build a small temple for the man and the woman at the place. Veer listened to the story with growing sorrow. He realized that the couple they talked about was none other than his brother and the wife. Unable to bear the news, he turned into a statue of limestone. Do you know how they all have been remembered ever since? Their tall tree grew nuts called areca nuts and the creeper leaves, palm or beetle leaves. And from the statue came the lime paste that is added in the preparation of pan. And this is how the loving family came together even after death. Together they taught the value of the love, unity and loyalty when people chew pan and they remember this story. Sharon's mom was surprised to hear this story. Really, Ajji? Even I was not aware why these ingredients are always used to make pan. I will now. I too will listen to your story from now. Ajji nodded. Then she added with that glint in her eyes, chewing pan is not good for your teeth. Everyone, off to go to brush your teeth. So, story number 12, payasam for a beer. Ajay and Vishnu Kaka were planning something. They could be spotted grinning and nodding and whispering. The children were dying to know what it was. Then one evening, they finally broke the news. They were all going on a picnic. It would be a picnic at nearby falls. These waterfalls were really beautiful, with the river meandering close by and the forest just across. The children got even more excited when two grandpas revealed the rest of the plan. Tomorrow would be rest for Ajji and Sharon's mother because all the cooking would be done by them and the children, and they would do it in traditional way, gathering firewood and then cooking meal from scratch. The children were too excited they could hardly sleep that night. All they could talk about was the picnic and what they would cook. Before nodding off, they had decided the menu. Pulao and kheer. Payasam or kheer is so easy to make, and who doesn't love it? The next day, even the usual late risers were up and about ready to set on the picnic by 7 o'clock. Oh, what a beautiful spot it was! They all ran around exclaiming over everything and getting ready with their cricket bat and balls for a game. Ajji sat comfortably under a big tree and it was time to get lunch ready. Everyone started looking for the twigs used as a firewood. Ajji spotted Divya straying towards the dense thicket of the forest trees and called out, "Divya, come back, don't go there. Who knows what animal is there? And top of that, you are going to cook payasam." Meenu's ear pricked up immediately. Why? Why, Ajji? What does payasam have to do with animals? Ajji grinned. But bears love payasam, don't you know? Everyone declared that they never known this piece of information. So cooking and games were forgotten. Young and old gathered around her to hear the story of bear who wanted to eat payasam. Did you know that you must never ever anger a bear? It is true, an angry bear can do some really awful things. So it is always safer to keep your word to him. Poor Mohan and Basanti did not knew this and tried to trick a bear and see what happened to them. Mohan had a banana plantation where he grew delicious banana. He also had a huge mango tree which provided him with a basket of juicy mangoes every summer. He would sell these fruits in the market and lived happily enough with his wife Basanti. Once his tree yielded an exceptionally large crop of banana and mango, and he decided to sell them in the market in the city, where he would go the higher price for them. So off he went with his sacks and baskets to the city for them. There he sat in the market, sold everything he had brought, and made a quite bit of money. At the market, he ran into an old friend, Amar. Mohan and Amar were overjoyed to see each other after many years. "Come to my house, dear friend," insisted Amar. "Let us enjoy a good meal and talk about our childhood days." Mohan thought this was a wonderful idea and went with Amar to his house. There, two friends ate huge quantity of rice, dal, lovely vegetable, and all kind of sweet. Then finally came out the best part of the meal, the payasam. Payasam is known by the many names all over the India. Some call it kheer, some call it payesh, and some others payasam. It is made with milk, rice, and jaggery and many other ingredients. It is always yummy. So was the payasam that Amar served his friend. It was made with fragrant rice, creamy milk, sweet as sugar, jaggery, and strewn with nuts, cardamoms, saffron, and with all kind of wonderful mouth-watering things. Mohan ate and ate bowl after bowl of this dessert till he was ready to burst. Then two friends chatted and rested till it was time for Mohan to head back his home. When he reached his house, he told the wife about the scrumptious meal, particularly the payasam he had eaten. Oh, how Basanti sighed and longed to have tasted this dish too. Seeing her face, Mohan suggested, "See, I have earned a plenty of money by selling these fruits. Why don't I buy the things required to make payasam, which you can cook and both of us will enjoy it together?" Basanti thought this was a wonderful idea, but first Mohan needed to go to the forest to collect some firewood. Then he would go to the shop and get all the things what was required to make the dessert. So off Mohan went, swinging his axe and whistling a tune. Now who would be sitting dozing under a tree in the forest but a big pack bear? He had just had some nice berries for lunch and was enjoying his snooze when Mohan walked by. First Beer opened one eye, then another, and watched Mohan cut a few branches of a nearby collected twig for firewood. Just as Mohan was tying it all in a bundle, the bear spoke up. "Hi there, friend. Where are you off to such happy mood? Tell, why are you collecting so much firewood? Tell me, are you cooking a feast tonight?" Mohan was astonished and little scared to be addressed like this by a bear. Yes, your honor. I mean, dear bear, sir," he mumbled and stammered. Bear was happy after his meal, so he decided to chat some more with Mohan. "So tell me, what are you going to cook tonight?" he asked, patting his tummy. "Payasam," answered Mohan. "Paya? What?" The bear was puzzled. "Payasam," Mohan said slowly. It's a sweet dish." "Tell me more." The bear was intrigued. So Mohan described the payasam and how it was made. As he talked about the milk and rice and the nuts and jaggery, the bear's eyes started gleaming, his stomach started rumbling, and he realized he absolutely total needed to taste this wonderful human food. "Oh, Mohan, my friend, do let me come and share your payasam tonight," the bear begged. Mohan was astonished. A bear as a guest at the dinner? Who knew what he would eat? But neither he could say no. That seemed so rude, and the bear was looking at him hopefully. He sighed and replied, "All right, you can come. But to cook payasam, I will need much more firewood. Can you bring that with them?" Cunning Mohan thought he would make the bear do work for him, so he did not need to come for the forest next few days. Yes! Bear jumped up. "Tell me, how much firewood do you need? 10, 20, 30 bundles? How much?" 50 would be enough, decided Mohan. Then he slung his bundle of the firewood over his shoulder and went back home. On the way, he bought lots of milk, rice, and everything else they would need it to make the payasam. When he reached home, he told Basanti about the unusual guest who would come to share the dessert. So Basanti cooked a huge quantity of payasam. She added lovely nuts, aromatic saffron, sweet cardamoms, and many wonderful things into it as she cooked. Oh, how marvelous the payasam smelled! Unable to wait any longer, the two started eating, helping after helping the dish without waiting for their guest to turn up. They ate till they realized that they have eaten up everything. There was not a grain of rice, not a half nut left for that bear. They sat around wondering what to do. What would they say to a bear when he came expecting to eat payasam? Then a devious plan entered Mohan's head. What if they made a payasam with all kind of other ingredients? After all, it was only a beer, and he had never tasted this dish earlier, so how he would know what is really tasted like? The cunning man and his wife then took a little bit of milk, added lots of water to it, threw in a handful of rice, and instead of jaggery and nuts and spices, they added pebbles, sand and cardamom husk, and they stirred, and till the mixture looked it somewhat like payasam. They placed a brass pot filled with the front of the house and went and hid in the bushes somewhere at back. As soon as night fell, a huge dark figure appeared down the road. On its back it carried 50 bundles of firewood. It was a bear come to dinner. He reached Mohan's house and looked around. There was no one. Then right in the front of the house he spotted pot full of payasam. Unable to wait any longer, he flung down the bundle he had carried and fell upon the payasam. Only after he had eaten more than half the pot full, he realized something was wrong. The milk was watery and the rice was half cooked, and there was a horrible grit and pebbles between his teeth. Ah! How the angry was bear now! Furious, he shouted out for Mohan, but Mohan was covering behind the bushes and did not reply. Now, angrier than ever, the bear spotted the mango tree and rubbed his back against him. The mangoes came raining down. He shook tree so hard, Bear continued to stamp the shake tree till it fell with huge crash on the top of banana field and crushed the best banana plants. Seeing the firewood he had carried in the way, Bear started throwing them around. One fell into the oven and the kitchen set fire to the house. Soon Mohan and Basanti's house was in flame, his field ruined, and his prized mango tree was destroyed. Finally, satisfied that he had taken his revenge, the bear stormed back into the forest. When Mohan and his wife crawled out of their hiding place and came back home, they saw everything was in ruins. How they wailed and wept and wished that they hadn't been greedy and left Bear his share of payasam. But what the use of lamenting now? The damage was done, and the greedy couple had learned what I told you earlier. Never ever anger the bear, and if you make a promise to one, keep it. Story number 13, Fire on the Beard. What a grand picnic everyone had! They played and ate and splashed water in the till late evening. Ajja and Ajji had to drag them back home. That night the children tumbled into bed and were fast asleep even before Ajji switched off the lights. Quietly she tucked them in. The next morning there was no sign of anyone of waking up. Ajja and Ajji went about their work, not waking the children. But when it was 10 o'clock, Ajji decided they had to wake up now. So she came into the room and found all four were up and chatting in the bed. She looked at them for a while with her hands on hips. Then she said, "So, I think you had enough rest. Now, up all of you, wash up and get ready." All the others jumped except Anand. He grinned at Ajji and said, "You know, I can live without food if I get to lie in the bed all day." "Really?" Ajji said, "So be it. Everyone else, lunch will be ready at 12, so be there on time. Oh, and those who lie around the bed will also miss the afternoon story." Then she walked off, trying to hide a smile. Anand and miss a meal. He was the one who loved his food the most. Anand was quiet. The rest sprang out of their beds and went to brush their teeth and have a bath. Soon the aroma of onion dosa, yum, wafted through the house. It was too delicious to resist. Everyone gathered in the kitchen to help to grind the dosa batter. By now, Anand was bored and hungry, lying alone in the bed. He quietly went and took his bath. He worried, what if Ajji had took him seriously and not kept a share of dosa for him? And what if he had to miss that day's story? When Ajji saw him appear at the kitchen and join, she laughed and said, "You have become like a bridge." Who is Bridge Ajji? So Ajji started the story while the children ate the dosas. Yawn! Bridge stretched out in the sun, yawned loud and long, and went back to sleep. Is a Bridge rich man on a holiday? Or has he worked hard all day and just resting for a while? Neither. Bridge was the laziest, most good for nothing fellow you'll ever met. He would spend entire day just lying around on his bed, doing nothing. He was too lazy to even trim his beard and it had grown right down to his knees. All day he sat around combing and admiring it, doing nothing else. His mother would call him, his wife would scold him, but Bridge was not one to mend his ways. That is how most conversation and his wife Shanti could go. Can you get some water from the well? There is no water in the house. The well is dry. There's no water there. Can you fetch water from the pond at least? The pond is too far. I can't walk so much for a pot of water. Then please pluck those coconuts from the tree. Oh, those coconuts are still tender. Let's pluck them next month. What about getting some areca nuts from the tree then? Don't you know, areca nuts are not good for health. Help me plough the field then. It is too hot. The sun will burn my skin. It's better if you two did not go there. Can you at least look after the house when I am in the field? There's nothing to look after in the house. And so on, Bridge would make excuses not for doing any work that was asked him. Of course, he was never too tired to eat. As soon as his wife would lay out meal, he would jump out of bed saying, "Oh, you have prepared the food for me with such love. It's my duty to eat it." And then he would gobble down all that was given. When evening fell, Bridge would roll out of the bed, comb his hair and beard, and set off to meet his gang of friends. Seeing how he managed to get off doing any work, many others in the villages have decided to do the same. All these people had formed a club, the Idlers Club. They would meet every evening and sit around and talk about all kind of things. They claimed this way they were improving the general knowledge, but all they were really doing was gossip and boast. Bridge, as the leader of the club, would get to boast loudest and the longest. One day the topic was who was the laziest of all. Bathing every day is such a waste of time and precious water. I take bath once in 2 days. That's I even save water, said Manoj, who was an environmentalist. I never napped my bed, boasted Suresh, the innkeeper. Why bother when you have to lie down in it once again in the end of the day? I eat my food out of the vessel in which it's cooked, claimed Raju, the cook. Putting the food in the plate only increases the work for you, and you will need to wash it too. Now Bridge thought he should say something that would beat all other tall tales, so he said, I am always cool and calm. Why, even if my beard were to catch fire, I would start digging a well at the time and never store water close at hand. As these discussions were happening, a real fire broke out on the village. It burned down buildings and roofs and sheds, crackling and throwing up sparks, making villagers run helter and skelter, looking for water douse the flame. The Idlers Club heard all the commotion, but no one bothered to step out to see what was happening. What is going on? They only asked each other. Oh, nothing. Bridge dismissed the topic. Must be some circus or other. So, what we were talking about? By now, the fire had spread to their road. It was fast making its way to the house where the idlers were sitting. It got hotter and hotter. Bridge's friend started to sweating and getting nervous by now. Soon, the roof of the house caught fire. Still, Bridge kept saying, "Don't worry, don't worry. It will rain now and put this out." Then, the wind is blowing in opposite direction and it will blow it down. We are really cool people. We should not be afraid of a fire. Finally, his friends could stand it no longer and rushed screaming out of the house. Finally, fire caught up with him and Beard started getting singed. Now, even Bridge was scared. "Help!" he shouted. "Now you can start digging the well," his friends suggested. "Oh, get me some water from the pond," Bridge begged. "That's too far away," the others shouted. "Outside. Maybe it will rain," they added. By now, the bird was burning away merrily, and all Bridge could do was leap and dance away from the flames, till suddenly there were splashes and splashes of water. Someone was emptying cool water on his fire and putting it out. Bridge could not believe his luck. Who had saved him? Why, it was Shanti and many other women of the village who had worked and drawn water from wells and ponds to save their homes. Finally, Bridge learnt a lesson. Being lazy and pretending to be cool had certainly not helped him in his hour of need. So he shaved off his half-burned beard, woke up early each morning and did all that Shanti told him to do and more. Story number 14. The Way You Look at It. On a sleepy afternoon, while the sun continued to shine, the clouds opened up and it started to rain. Sharan had fallen asleep after eating at least 15 puris for lunch. When he woke up, he saw a rainbow in the sky. There was a mid-drizzle and bright sunshine of summer. In the sky was bold, bright clear rainbow. Sharan ran to Ajji's house and started calling out to his friends. Suma, Krishna were playing in the garden. Raghu and Divya were reading. Anand was sleeping. Sharan was so excited he called out to each one, "Ajja, Ajji, Suma, Krishna, Raghu, Anand, Divya, come and see this." Everyone rushed out to see what was up. The children gazed in amazement at the rainbow. Living in the city, none of them ever got to see such a vast expanse of sky unhindered by tall buildings. Ajay and Ajji were used to it and went back to their work. That evening, while having their milk, the children were talking about rainbows. Color of the rainbow are known as Vibgyor, said Raghu. A rainbow is called Indradhanush in Sanskrit, said Suma. It's known as Kamana Bellu in Kannad, the bow of Lord Kamadev, said Sharan's mother. In olden days, if the sun and rain came together, we used to say it's Fox wedding and all of us had to go on the rainbow to reach the wedding, said Ajji. Ultimately, it is the same thing, 7 colors that appear in the sky when the sun's rays are reflected by the rainwater, said Ajja. It depends upon the way you look at it. Ajji nodded. The same thing appears different depending on the way you look at it. And today I can tell you a story about that. Immediately, everyone turned their attention from the sky to Ajji. Now, the story. During one monsoon season, it rained and rained in Chitpur, a little village by a mighty river. It rained so hard that river swelled up. Huge waves lashed against the riverbank and carried away trees, houses, and big chunks of earth. The villagers were really scared and prayed hard for the rain to stop. When finally the skies were cleared, one by one people emerged from their house. One of them was Raju. He walked down to the riverside. There he saw something that made him rub his eyes in disbelief. Why, a huge black rock had appeared there out of nowhere. And what was more, the rock looked exactly like the head of the Ganesha, the god with elephant head. Raju immediately prostrated in front of the rock. Ganesha not only heard our prayers and made the rains go away, he has come himself to protect us, said Raju and shouted to no one in particular. I must tell everyone about this, he yelled and ran back to the village to shape the news. Next came Chetar, the sculptor. He had spent many days cooped up in the house for waiting the rains to stop. Now he was glad to be out in the open and was thinking of his next piece of work. Suddenly he caught sight of the new rock by the river. It was just the right color, worn smooth with age and river water. It was perfect for the scene he wanted to carve. Giving a whoop of joy, he ran home to gather his carving tools. Just as he turned the corner, a merchant came and he stopped on his horse. The animal was thirsty and he stopped there for it to have a drink of water from the river. He too spotted the stone. What a big stone, he remarked, and it is nice and smooth and flat. Let me sit on it while and rest. After enjoying a nice rest on the rock, merchant decided he would tell all his friends about it. They were traveling together and all of them would be thrilled to be able to sit there for some time by the river. He went off to find his friends. Then next came Ajit, the soldier, came on his horse. He got down and washed his face. While his horse was drinking water, he was looking around and the same stone caught his attention. He was surprised and said to himself, what a huge stone on the riverbed. Maybe I should get it removed so that in emergency it should not become a hindrance on the road. Our army can march better if such obstacles are not there. I must inform my commander. Thinking so, he rushed back to his camp to talk his commander. Later in the day, Bholu, the village washerman, appeared by the river with his big bundle of clothes. To his astonishment, he found a crowd right around his favorite washing spot. They were all arguing around a rock. Pushing his way into the crowd, Bholu spoke in a loud voice. Hey, what do you think you all are doing? Raju now burst out. This rock is a sign of Lord Ganesha. I want to worship it. Chetan raised his voice even louder and said, No, this rock is going to be for my next sculpture. The merchant shouted, I have invited all my friends to rest on it. It is ours. Ajit was giving orders to his soldiers to remove the stone. Bholu now grinned and said, But this rock has been here for years and years. Earlier, half of it was submerged in the mud. Now, with the rains and mud got washed off, you are seeing more of it. The washermen of Chitpur have been using this rock to do our washing for many years. There's nothing miraculous about it. Now, off with you all. I have many work to do. So saying, Bholu emptied his bundle of cloth and set to work. What could others do? They had to go away grumbling quietly to themselves. Story number 15, Rupa's Great Escape. Ajja's and Vishnu Kaka's houses were teeming with people. There was a village festival and the friends and relatives from near and far had come to Shigon. There were people the children had not seen or even heard about before. Some said, I am your father's fourth cousin. Some else said, I am your grandmother's second cousin. The houses were full of there and there was a lot of fun and laughter everywhere. Nobody expected a separate bedroom or a special dish at the dining table. They all ate together and talked everybody and slept on the floor on the mattress. The city children were surprised at the ease with which guests made themselves at home. The women helped out in kitchen in the morning and in the evening, and they dressed in shining silk saris and went to the fair. In fact, everyone dressed in their best, putting 200 rupees Ajja gave in their pocket and purses made for the fair. The fair itself was quite astonishing. The children from Mumbai said, It's like a Chowpatty or Juhu beach. The Delhi kids said, It's similar to Janpath. Others said, It's like Karga or Kallekai Parishe in Bangalore. Vishnu Kaka explained, In every village, There is a village god or goddess, and once a year we worship them in a grand way. At the festival and fair, it is not about selling and buying, it is also about meeting people and exchanging gifts, having a feast and a good time. The group moved shop to shop, peeping into photo studios, examining bangles, waiting for a turn on merry-go-round, and clapping along to the dances when some noticed Suma was missing. Somewhere in the crowd, she had got separated from the rest, and there was no sign of her. Immediately, her mother started wailing, and Ajji consoled her. Vishnu Kaka too looked really worried. The children were scared and thrilled too. This was just like home alone. As Vishnu Kaka was about to make his way to the police assistant's booth, they heard Suma's voice on the mic. I am at the police station, Vishnu Ajja. Please come and fetch me. When Suma had been traced, her mother started scolding her. But Suma was not bothered. I wasn't worried, she said. In the crowd, when I realized I was not with you people, I straightway went to the police station and told them to make an announcement. Everyone declared she was a very grave and sensible girl, and for a change that day, Vishnu Kaka said, Today I will tell you a story about a young girl like Suma who had a lot of courage. I read this story in a book when I was young. Story. Once there lived a very clever young girl called Rupa. She was an orphan and had been taken care all of her life by the people of the village in which she lived. She was very hardworking, and once she became old enough, she lived all by herself and looked after herself. But she always missed having family of her own, even though her neighbors were such loving and caring people. Diwali was around and the corner, and everyone was excited. They were discussing what new clothes they would get. Some were expecting their husbands and fathers to return to the village with lovely gift for them, and were looking forward to the all merrymaking that would happen over the next few days. Only Rupa was quiet. She did not have anyone to buy her new clothes or shoes or presents. The villagers were kind to her, but they had barely enough for their own needs, so how could she expect from them to get anything for her? Yet today, hearing all happy and chatter, she could not keep quiet any longer. Even I will get a new sari this year, she told Rama, her best friend. Rama and all other girls were astonished. Who was going to get Rupa her new sari? I heard from a distant uncle the other day. He was working for many years in a faraway city and did not know my parents had died. Now that he is back, he had promised to visit on me in Diwali. I am sure he will bring some marvelous gift for me. Rupa had started weaving a story, and now she kept adding, telling all kind of tales about her imaginary uncle. Her friends listened open-mouthed. They went to their home, telling each other what luck Rupa was finally no longer all alone in this world. As soon as a bunch of women had gone away, who emerged from behind a tree, but Bholu the trickster. He had been sitting under the tree planning his next step when he fell asleep. Then he had woken up seeing the woman at the river and had sat there still hoping to hear something about the villagers. Sure enough, he had heard Rupa's story and was now ready with a plan. Bholu decided to dress up as an old man and appear at Rupa's house a few days before Diwali, pretending to be her uncle. Then he would have taken her away along with any valuables and she may have got from her parents. A week before Diwali, an old stranger appeared at Rupa's door. He was carrying new clothes, sweets, and other gifts. Rupa was out doing some errands, so her neighbors came around to find who he was. Bholu acted perfectly like Rupa's long-lost uncle, eagerly waiting to meet her. When Rupa returned home, she found everyone sitting around an old man who said he was the uncle she had made up a story about. Rupa was astonished. How had this happened? She had only been pretending to have a relative just so her friends would not feel sorry for her, and now here he was A real person? Then her neighbor, who had looked her after all these years, said, Rupa, this is your uncle Bholu. He learned that he had an eyes and came looking for you. He wants to take you home with him and look after you like his own daughter. You are so lucky, Rupa. We are so happy for you. Rupa looked around at everyone, beaming happily at her, and thought what harm there would be if she went away with his uncle. She happily packed whatever little things she owned and waving goodbye to her friends and neighbor went off with Bholu. No sooner they had reached his house than he took off his disguise and appeared before her a young man. Rupa was horrified. Oh, what a fool she had to believe in his story and come away with him. He was nothing but a trickster. In Bholu's house there was no one else but his mother, who was old and a little deaf and blind. After eating his lunch, Bholu decided to walk about for a while, meeting with his friends and telling how he had kidnapped Rupa. She too ate her lunch, pretended she was very sleepy, and yawned loudly and told his mother, Auntie, I am very tired after that long journey. I am going to bed for a little while. If your sons come round, tell him not to wake me up. Bholu's mother nodded, though she had not heard much. Rupa quickly went to the other room, borrowed some of the Bholu's cloth, wore them, and ran off. She took with her a few coins and a thick stick to defend herself if needed be. Before leaving, she arranged a pillow in such a way that in the evening darkness it would look like someone was sleeping on the bed. Then she covered on the pillows with a dupatta and a sheet. If anyone only looked from the door, it would seem a woman was sleeping on the bed. Bholu returned home when it was all well past. His mother told him Rupa was in her room. He peeped in, saw someone sleeping, and went away. Many hours passed. Bholu kept checking whether Rupa was awake or not, but each time he saw her sleeping without moving a muscle. Finally, he realized something was wrong. He went up to the bed and now pulled back the dupatta and the sheet. Imagine his shock when he saw nothing but pillows on the bed. Rupa had disappeared. He ran out immediately and asked around if they have seen a young pretty girl walk out of his house, but no one had, because Rupa had cleverly disguised herself as a man. Meanwhile, Rupa too had walked many miles till she reached a different town. There she looked around for work and was taken in by an innkeeper to look after the guests to show their rooms. Rupa, who was now called Rupesh, was happy doing this work. She could not return to her village till she did something to Bholu, otherwise he would be sure land up there and bring back with him, pretending to be her uncle. After many days, Bholu turned up at the town. He walked from shop to shop to inn to the market, asking if anyone had seen someone like Rupa. Of course, no one had. Rupa got to know and decided to teach him a lesson. When Bholu reached her inn, he did not recognize her in men's clothes. She agreed to give him a room and the night. She told him, Sir, I will give you a room in the attic. It is nice and warm and cozy there, and you will be away from this harsh winter cold. Bholu happily agreed and followed to her room. A ladder was kept in the middle of the room, which went to a little trapdoor. If you climbed through the door, you entered the attic. Bholu quickly went up the ladder, found his web, wrapped his blanket around, and went off to sleep. When it was the middle night, Rupa sneaked into the room and removed the ladder. Then she threw some marble right under the trapdoor and stamped loudly around the room. Bholu woke up with a start. Who was that walking around his room? He called down, Who is it? Rupa called out in her man's voice, Nothing to worry, sir. The soldiers are looking for a thief they believe hiding in this inn. Bholu was scared. How did the soldiers know he was a thief and a trickster? He was sure they were looking for him and decided to make a run for it. He opened the trapdoor and stepped down, but there was no ladder. Bholu fell with a loud thud on the floor. When he tried to get up, His feet slipped on many marbles strewn and about the room, and he went crashing and sliding over all the place. Finally, he hit his head against a wall and passed out unconscious. Rupa had been watching this from the door with a great delight. Her plan has worked. Soon as Bholu fainted, she heaved him and packed him in a large box, and she placed a nice silk cloth on the top of him. Then she dragged the box outside the inn and stood there. Soon, bullock cart was passing with two travelers heading for the inn. When they saw Rupa or Rupesh standing outside the inn, they asked, "Are you the manager of this inn?" Rupa nodded yes. "Why are you standing here then?" Rupa replied in a worried face, "I look after this inn. I was supposed to go to my own village earlier and to work, and today I wanted to attend a wedding, but there was so much of work that I could not leave. Now here I am waiting for my cart with his heavy box." Then she lowered her voice and whispered, "This box is full of gifts I bought for the wedding, and if I don't reach the time, everyone will be really disappointed." The two travelers, who were up to no good themselves, looked at each other. The same thought had come to both. They said, "Don't worry, brother. You can take a ride on our cart. Why don't you put the box on the cart here? But before we start, would you mind getting us a drink of water?" Rupesh smiled to herself and dragged the box on the cart. Then she went inside to fetch on the water. She took her time. As soon as her back turned, the two travelers opened the box to see what it contained. They saw some lovely silk cloth on the top. Now assured that they had got their hands on some valuable, they quickly urged their bullocks to make a dash for it. Once they were well and truly out of sight, Rupa grinned to herself. Her plan had worked. She ran to the nearest police station and told all about theft. The two men in the bullock cart were just celebrating their box when they were horrified to see soldiers waiting for them down the road. What could they do? They wondered. They were crossing a bridge over that time and quickly tipped the box into the water. Then they heaved a sigh of relief and went their way. So, that was the end of the Bholu, and Rupa too returned to her village, where she lived happily on her own. She was not going to trust any stranger anymore. And that's what brave Suma did too. When she was in trouble, and she did not talk to any stranger but went straight to the police for help. We must always remain cool like this when we get in trouble. Signed off, Vishnu Kaka. Suma was delighted at this praise and ate her bhajiyas with great happiness all way the home. Story number 16. 5 spoons of salt. One morning, Ajji told Ajja, "Today is a Santhe, means a village market day which happens once in a week. Why don't you take the children and show them the Santhe and buy vegetables and other things for the house?" Ajja, who normally would have said yes, was hesitant. "How will I manage all the children, and that too at Santhe? Remember what happened at the Jatre, the fair? At least there they had a temporary police assistant booth. There will be nothing of the sort at Santhe." Ajji agreed. This was a problem. Then she had an idea. "Why don't we ask for Vishnu, if he can spare Damu for a few hours? Damu can accompany you and help see that children are all right." Damu was Vishnu Kaka's right-hand man. Everyone called him Mr. Dependable. He drove the car, cooked, and looked after the fields, the account, and made sure Vishnu Kaka was well cared. Without him, Vishnu Kaka could not run the house or do anything in the fields. Vishnu Kaka's son lived with his family in Delhi and came only for holidays, so Damu was his real companion. So it was that all 7 children and Damu had a Ajja were now ready to visit Santhe. Damu had a plan. "The Santhe is only 2 kilometers away. Why don't we walk and let your Ajja go in on the auto?" The children were horrified. "Walk for 2 kilometers in the heat. It would be so boring, too," added Raghu. But Damu had made up his mind. "Walk with me. I will tell you such wonderful stories that you will forget everything, even the heat." The children agreed. Then Meenu had a condition. It has to be a true story, Damu Anna. Damu was unfazed. I'll tell you a story about my sister. Do you know how came to be known as Mr. Dependable? I saw what happened to her once because she was forgetful and decided never to let that happen to me. So she started his story. Geeta, where are you? I need you to run down to the store and get these medicines for me. Geeta's grandfather called out for her. Where was Geeta? She was lying in the bed reading a book. For a long time she pretended not to have heard what her grandfather said. Then book was just so exciting and it was too hot outside. She really did not feel like stirring out of the bed. Geeta! This time her mother's voice also called out to her. With a sigh, the girl got out of the bed and went to see what was needed to be done. Her grandfather handed her some money and said, I have a really bad headache since morning. Will you get me these medicines for me? Geeta took the money and set off for the store. On the way, she passed a sweet shop. Oh, what lovely gulab jamuns and laddu and jalebis were displayed. She had to have some. Forgetting all about her errand, she entered the shop and started tucking into the sweets. Soon, a friend came by and joined her. The two girls ate and chatted for a really long time. Geeta had forgotten all about her poor grandfather with his headache. Afternoon turned into the evening. The medicine store shut for the day when Geeta remembered why she had stepped out of her house. When she hurried back home, how upset her grandfather was. When will you grow up, Geeta? Become responsible, he sighed and asked. Geeta felt really bad, but did she mend her ways? No, she remained a forgetful person. When her mother told her to collect the clothes from the washing line outside, she remembered to do only so next morning. By then, clothes were already soaked through all and over again because of the overnight rains. Another day, she had to take her sister's lunchbox to the school. On the way, she saw a circus was in town. All morning, Geeta spent wandering around the circus tent, watching animals eating and training for their acts. It was only when she felt hungry herself and did she looked down at the lunchbox in her hand and realized her sister must have gone home by then after spending a day in school without lunch. Another time, her father, while rushing to get for work, asked if she could quickly iron his shirt. Geeta picked up the shirt and placed it on the ironing table next to the window. Just then the fruit vendor passed by with fat, big, juicy mangoes in his basket. Of course, Geeta forgot all about the hot iron sitting on the shirt and got engrossed in choosing the best mangoes. Only when smoke started billowing out to the shirt had burnt crisp as toast, and did she look around and see what had happened. Her father was very upset indeed that day. Some days after this incident, Geeta came home from school and announced that the whole class was being taken for a picnic next day. The teacher had asked each student to bring one food item from home which would be shared by all children. Geeta had chosen to bring sambar. She was very proud of her mother's tasty, tangy sambar and was eager to share it with her friends so they could taste it too. Geeta's mother agreed to make a big pot of sambar for her to take the picnic next day. And that night, Geeta went to bed feeling very happy, dreaming about the exciting day ahead. The next morning, her mother woke up early and started making the sambar. She boiled the dal, added the vegetables, coconut and all the spices and set the boiling pot on the stove. Soon a delicious aroma wafted around the pot and tickled Geeta's nose as she lay sleeping in the bed. Seeing her stir, her mother told her, "Geeta, wake up now, dear. See, the sambar is ready. I'm going to the temple, so after some time just add 5 teaspoons of salt to it. Don't forget now and wake up early and get ready quickly." So saying, she bustled off. Geeta's grandmother, who was in the kitchen, heard all this and muttered to herself, "When will my daughter-in-law learn that Geeta can never remember anything? I'm sure the girl will forget to add the salt." Then she will be teased by all her friends. Better to be careful. So saying, she went and added the salt in the pot. Geeta's grandfather was sitting on the veranda reading his newspaper. Remembered only too well the day he had spent with a headache waiting for Geeta to return with the medicine which never came. Geeta, and remember something, that'll be the day, he muttered and went himself into the kitchen and added the salt in the sambar himself. Geeta's sister was combing her hair, ready to go off to the school. She too recalled the day when she had to spend feeling hungry in the school, waiting for Geeta to turn up and with her lunchbox. Sure that Geeta would forget about the salt and will be laughed at by her friends, she quickly went in the stall and added 5 spoons of salt. Geeta's brother was brushing his teeth and hearing his mother's word to his sister. Guessed she would forget about the salt. He dropped a few spoons of salt onto pot and went off. Geeta's father carefully ironing his own shirt. Like the others, he too slipped into the kitchen and added the salt to the pot of sambar. By now, Geeta had woken up and wonder of wonders remembered she needed to add the salt. So she too went and added 5 teaspoons, as her mother had told her to do. By now her mother had returned and quickly poured the sambar into a big container and sent her daughter for the picnic. At the picnic spot, children had a very wonderful time roaming around and playing. Soon they were too hungry to do anything. Out of came the big plates and the spoons and all the containers filled to the brim with food. Plates were piled up with rice, chutneys, vegetables, puris and all kind of goodies. Everyone took large helping of the sambars as Geeta served it out. But no sooner than they put the first spoonful into their mouth, they said, "Black! Horrible! Water!" Everybody started shouting. Astonished, Geeta wondered what was wrong. Then gingerly tasted rice and sambar on her own plate. It was disgusting. It was as if her mother had dredged out all the salt in the sea and added it to the sambar. Then Geeta remembered her mother had not added the salt. She had? So what had gone wrong? That day, everyone in Geeta's house waited eagerly for her to get back from the school and tell them about her wonderful outing. But what was this? She came trudging back, her face and sad tears stained. But what had happened? Geeta burst at them. Did anyone else added the salt in the sambar? I did, said grandmother. I did too, said grandfather. So did I, said father. Me too, said her brother. And I, said her sister. They all looked at each other in dismay. No wonder Geeta looked so sad. Her friends would have made her feel miserable about the salty sambar. Why did you all do? Amma had told only me to do so. Geeta wept. Oh dear, you forget everything you are told to do. So we thought, perhaps you wouldn't remember this time too. All of them said sadly. Now her mother pulled her close, wiped her away tears and said, See, this happened all because no one could believe you could do anything without being reminded many times about it. Promise you will be a careful and responsible girl from now and we will all trust you to do your work. Geeta sniffed and nodded her head. She did become much more careful with her chores after that. And it took a lot of convincing, but her friends did come to her house for lunch one day and tasted her mother's delicious cooking, especially her tasty, tangy sambar. And everyone agreed it was the best sambar they have ever eaten. When the story was over, the children realized they were already at Santhe. There were heaps of vegetables and sweets, flowers all around. There were goats, cows, buffaloes, fish, chicken and eggs for sale. The smell of nuts, cardamom and other spices hung into the air. It was unlike the fair where people had to come to have a good time. Here a lot of business was taking place and everyone was buying and selling busily. The fruits and vegetables were very fresh. The flowers looked as if they had just been plucked. Everyone was friendly. The fruit vendor saw Ajay and said, Namaste, Master Ji. Oh, you have come with your grandchildren. It is nice to see everyone see like this. Then he gave each one a mango. When Ajja offered money, he wouldn't take it. He said, "After all, you were my masterji, my teacher. Can't I give 7 mangoes as gifts to your grandchildren? They are from my garden, not that I purchased them." The children were delighted at his warmth and kindness and returned home very happy that day. Story number 17, How the Seasons Got Their Share. It was usually hot afternoon and there was a power cut. The children were sitting in the house, wiping their foreheads and complaining. "How do you stay without electricity, Ajja?" asked Raghu. "In Mumbai, in our apartment, if ever the electricity goes off, the generator comes on automatically. We never even know that power cut has gone." Ajja looked around at the hot, sweaty face and said, "All right, I'll show you a place which is cool as an AC room and it stays that way without any electricity. Come on, everyone, grab a mat each and follow me." The children were intrigued. Ajja walked out into the garden, crossed it right till the old neem tree had stood in a corner. Ajja told them to spread their mats under the tree and lie down. It was deliciously cool and comfortable under the tree. Everyone lay down and looked up the gently moving leaves on the great branches over their heads. This was so much more fun than lying in a closed room. Ajja too pulled up a comfortable old easy chair and nodding off. After some time he said, "This is why I love summer. What season do you children prefer?" Immediately Anand said, "I too like summer because there is no school and we can eat ice cream and mangoes. We can also go to swimming." "I don't like summer, I like winter. You can wear colorful sweaters and eat different kind of fruits. It is nice and cozy to be at home. You can drink hot spoon soup and hot chocolate," said Krishna. "I don't like winter, I get ear pain. I prefer rainy season. It is so nice when it rains and all trees look so fresh and happy," said Meenu. "What about you, Raghu? Why are you silent?" Ajja asked. "I like all the seasons, provided someone like you or Ajji there with us." Ajja smiled. "Well, each season has its own beauty and use. We could not do without even one." "How is that?" asked children. "Okay, I will tell you a story about what happened once when the seasons started fighting one another. Now, the story. God stepped back and looked happily at the earth he had just created. He had filled it with humans, animals, trees, and seas. It looked a wonderful place to be in. But something was missing. After thinking for a while, he called out to the 6 brothers. Their names were Day, Night, Summer, Winter, Monsoon, and Wind. He commanded the 6 brothers to go down to the earth and help the creatures there live comfortably and prosper. "You must help the creatures on the earth to grow food and live comfortably. I have divided time into 2 parts, 24 hours and 365 days. You must share this among yourselves so that people on the earth get all that they need." The 6 brothers nodded obediently, but no sooner God's back turned than they started quarreling. Everyone wanted a big share of time available to spend on the earth. Day and Night decided each would get 24 hours each, but the season kept quarreling. Summer was the eldest, so he said, "I will be on earth for 365 days first." Rain said, "If I don't show up, all the water on the earth will disappear, so I will come next." Winter said, "After the rains, I help trees to flower, so I will come in the 3rd year." Poor Wind was the youngest and no one paid him any attention, so he got the last year. So, life started on earth. For 24 hours at a time there was day, then 24 hours of night. Summer began continued for 1 whole year. While in the summer, in the beginning, the heat helped to grow the crops. Soon it became too hot for anyone to do anything. It became too hot and water dried up. There was a great discomfort. The people of earth pleaded with summer to stop and he had to leave before his year was up. Then it was turn of rain. When he started pouring down, how happy everyone was to get some respite of the years of summer. But soon the lakes, ponds, and river oceans all filled to the brim and started overflowing. The crops got spoiled in the rain, and there was nothing for anyone to eat. When people prayed for him to stop, he had to step aside and make way for the winter. With relief, people greeted winter. Now there was neither scorching sun nor pouring rain. But when day after day went by like this, they started falling sick because of the constant cold. The plants started dying because of the less sunshine. At the people's request, winter too had to stop. Now it was turn of wind. Within a few days, his constant huffing and puffing, people were scared to step out anywhere. Trees were uprooted, the roots of houses went flying, and there was chaos all around. The brothers realized that what they have done would displease God mightily, so they decided to change their ways. Instead of each taking a year, they decided to share 1 year among each other. But again, Wind, being the youngest, got left out and got in no time for himself. He sat in a corner and sulked. During summer time, people sowed their crops and waited for the rains. Rain came load of water, but there was no wind to distribute it equally. Some part of earth got buckets of rain while others none at all. Now everyone realized wind was important. Now they called out to him. He finally agreed to do this. But he did not get a separate time for himself. He was allowed to blow all through the year. So in the summer, he blew and helped reduce the heat. During rains, he blew the clouds from one place to another and took rainwater everywhere. In the winter, he still blew and made it even cold. Day and night too learned from the 4 brothers and decided to divide the 24 hours equally. So one half was day and other half was night. Now everyone on earth was happy, and the 6 brothers learned to share their time. By this time, Ajji called from the house, "The electricity is back, you can come inside now." But the children were happy to remain outside and enjoy the breeze. Story number 18, The Island of Statues. One day, early in the morning, the children heard a loud voice booming outside. "Where are your grandchildren? I have come to take them to my place." They went running out to see a very tall man with twinkling eyes and grey beard sipping coffee with their grandparents. He wore a crisp white dhoti and shirt and a black cap. His smile was so charming that the children instantly warmed to him. Ajji was shaking her head and saying, "Rahmat, there's no way Pirambi can manage 4 children. Take them out for the day. Why do you want them to have overnight?" But the man, Rahmat, shook his head and said, No, I will take them for a night's stay. My Usman is a great cook and will look after everything. Pirambi will not be troubled at all." Ajji saw the questioning look on children's faces and explained, "This is Rahmat. A long time back, when your Ajja was a school teacher, he was your Ajja's student. He lives a little far away now. He has a mango grove there and a large house. All his children live abroad. In his house, there's a large library of books and what can be called a mini zoo with goats, cows, peacocks, pigeons, and parrots. He wants to have you all over for the night. I'm sure you'll have a good time. But do you want to go? He also tells very beautiful stories," added Ajja. Rahmat grinned and said, "Master Ji, don't exaggerate. I started reading children's storybook only after my grandchildren were born. Then I remembered the stories you told to us in the school and passed off the stories to some of my own." He turned to the children and said, "So what do you think, kids? Will you come with me? I'll show you a different part of the village." Everyone was thinking when Raghu spoke up, "Can we bring our friends with us?" "Oh, you mean Vishnu Kaka's grandchildren? Of course, they can come. The more merrier. Pirambi will loving having so many children in the house." Raghu ran to Sharan's house to give the news. Rahmat Chacha, as everyone called him, had brought a jeep, and soon all 7 had packed a change and raised their toothbrushes and piled into it. Rahmat Chacha's house was far, about 30 kilometers away, and on the way they had to go through the forest. The road cutting through the forest was narrow and winding. Tall trees stood on both sides. It was dark, scary places. Suma looked around nervously and said, "Will anyone cut down these trees and widen the road?" Rahmat Chacha shook his head. "Oh no, the villagers will never allow it. We love our trees and try to see as few are cut down as possible. Trees must never be cut unnecessarily. Do you want to listen a story about a kingdom that cut down all its trees?" Of course, the children did. So Rahmat Chacha began his story. Once there was a beautiful verdant green island. It had forest filled with huge trees, waterfalls gushing with clear blue water, and mountains where there was a quarry of one kind of stone. This stone has valued for its attractive white color. It was also easy to turn into sculptures. The island had been ruled for years by a king who was now old. He looked after his people well and loved the natural beauty of his land above all. His closest friend was a sculptor named Amar. Amar too loved the land more than anything else. He had a school where the students from far and wide came to learn the art of creating sculpture out of a stone. But Amar had one odd condition for the students who studied in the school. He insisted they bring their own supply of stone. Only for their final sculptures they were allowed to use a piece of stone from the island's quarry. Many grumbled at this rule. After all, dragging tons of stone to island in the middle of the sea was difficult. But Amma was adamant. Once his king asked him for the reason for this condition, and this is what wise old Amma had to say. "This is stone, and indeed everything on this remarkable land is ours gift, which we need to preserve. Unless we use it wisely, how we will be able to save this quarry for our children? If we start using the stones and wood from the trees without thought, they will soon start finishing, and then we will left with an empty, barren land. This is why I insist to students learning the craft of sculpting by bringing their own material. Only when they make final piece of art, they can use this unique stone from our land." The king applauded his thought on the mind and then let Amar run his school the way he wanted. But then a day came when the king, now very old, died and his son took over the throne. Rajdeep, the new king, wanted to do everything differently from his father. He started changing many laws. One day he remembered the art school and went to visit it. There he saw students working on their sculptures, but his minister whispered to him complaints, and other students who had not wanted to bring their own material had made about Amar's rule. Rajdeep realized that if he lifted the rule, then many more people will come to study in the school. Their fees would add prosperity to the land, and in addition, they would create lovely works of art that could use to beautiful towns. He ordered Amar to step down as teacher and brought someone else to run the school. Soon the island was full of students chipping away on the stone. Their demand increased the mining quarry. They created a large sculpture which now needed to get transported back to the town. Trees were cut down to make carts and to clear roads. Without trees to provide wood for their boats, for the fishermen of land could not go out to sea. They started fishing near the land and got in fight with one each another. New houses were not strong as both wood and stone were scarce. It was difficult for farmers to make a good plough, and so farming suffered. All the mining created so much pollution that the plants started dying out. Diseases spread, and tinkling waterfalls fell silent as water became scarce. The climate changed, and it became hotter and drier. Soon there were famines, and once beautiful green island was reduced to the wasteland of weeds and scrub. Rajdeep's wishes of lining his capital and place with giant sculpture was filled. Each student in the art school made a beautiful, huge statue and gifted to him. Soon these statues filled up and the entire kingdom. Where once there was deep forest, blue rivers, steamers, the island was barren land now. The forests were gone. The river had turned into dirty trickles of water. The climate had become hot and dusty as the rain no longer came on time. People started leaving the island. The houses, the schools, and palaces slowly fell silent as they were abandoned. With time, everyone forgot about this land. Many years later, when explorers landed here, they found hundreds of the statues strewn all over a land destroyed by the king's greed. How everyone enjoyed the story. The rest of the journey was spent in each one acting out a part of the story, with Rahmat Chacha taking on the role of the wise old king. Cheerful at the same time, very hungry, they soon reached their new friend's house. It was a huge, rambling place. Pirambi was waiting for them at the doorstep. She told Usman to make sharbat of mango, a shurkumbh, a kind of kheer for lunch. There was also paratha, biryani, and all kinds of mouth-watering dishes which Usman was more than happy to prepare. After lunch, they roamed around the house, examined the books in the library and the many awards Rahmat Chacha had received for his innovative skills in agriculture. Story number 19. The Kingdom of Fools.
Rahmat Chacha, you must be very intelligent. You know how so much about farming, fishing, stories and so many other things.
Meenu remarked that night as they sat outside watching the fireflies twinkling all around them. But Rahmat Chacha did not agree. No, not really. There is plenty I still don't know. In fact, one can never stop learning. Knowledge is only the thing it's good to be greedy about. It was a beautiful, clear night. The moon and stars shone in the black, unpolluted sky. Pirambi was feeling very happy. Her own grandchildren lived so far away and came to visit her only once or twice in the years. After so long, the house was filled with laughter and young voices. She was too frail to do much and was enjoying sitting among them and talking to them. Soon they started yawning and rubbing their eyes. But no one was going to bed till Rahmat Chacha told another story. The story. There once lived a king who was very intelligent. He looked upon anyone he thought was dull. He was also very proud of the fact that his kingdom in the people was no stupid people. Some distance away from the capital city lived an old teacher. He had taught the young prince, who was a sweet-natured boy once but had turned into a proud, rude king. Many people told him about the king's boastful nature as the teacher decided to teach his own pupil a lesson he would never forget. He called his three breast-bitest students, Harish, Mahesh and Umesh, and said, "We need to bring that proud king down a peg or two. I want 3 of you to teach him a lesson and make him realize the foolishness of his pride." The 3 students set off for the capital. Harish walked to the city market. There he met a man selling betel leaves. "How much for these leaves, Kaka?" he asked. 10 rupees for 200 leaves." The shopkeeper replied, "Here are my 10 rupees. Give me only 25 leaves. My servant will come and collect the balance 175 leaves." The betel leaf seller agreed and gave Harish 25 leaves. Harish now strolled into other shop where he saw beautiful shawls were being sold. "How much for this, uncle?" he asked, fingering the best shawl in the shop. 200 rupees, answered the shopkeeper. "Here are 25 rupees. You can collect the remaining 175 from the pan shop there," Harish said, handing the shopkeeper a note. "Please give the person who brings this note the remaining 100 shawl," the note read. The shawl shop owner sent his servant with the note to pawn shop verify if indeed this was true. The other shopkeeper glanced at the note and said, "Yes, it is true. I have to give him 175 more. Come back in half hour. I will count and keep them ready." The servant returned and whispered to his master. Indeed, the betel seller was going to give the remaining 175. Harish walked out with his shawl. After the half hour, when the servant went to collect the money, he found shopkeeper busy counting out the leaves. 173, 174, 175. "There you go. Here are the rest of the leaves." The servant was amazed at being handed a sheaf of palm leaves instead of money. He called the master and 2 shopkeepers started arguing loudly. Slowly they realized that someone had made the fools of them. They rushed to complain to the king. The king was surprised to hear how a stranger had tricked the clever shopkeeper of his kingdom. He decided to keep a lookout for the man. The next day, second student Mahesh walked into the royal carpenter's shop. It was the middle of afternoon and the carpenter was in shop tinkering with some strange looking instrument. Mahesh was well dressed, so carpenter thought he was rich. Enthusiastically, he started showing off his various creation. He picked up a large wooden lock and said, "See this? Will you believe that with this you can even lock a man? Place the person's head between the lock and the pillar and turn the key, and then the man cannot escape." Mahesh pretended to be skeptical. "Go on now. How can a simple wooden thing such a do this thing? I don't believe you." The carpenter got very agitated. He said, "But this is true, sir. I am the king's carpenter after all. I create many complicated instruments for the state. Here, let me show you." Saying this, he put the lock around his neck and the nearest pillar and turned the key. "Now, see, I cannot even move my neck. Are you convinced? Now just turn the key the other way to set me free." But Mahesh would not turn the key. He just stood there laughing. Then he coolly picked up the key and walked out of the shop. The carpenter could only shout at Mahesh retreating back, "You villain! Come back! Set me free!" But it was in vain. Mahesh has fooled him. Later that evening, king came to know of this other stranger who had duped the clever carpenter. He was worried. Who were these men, making the brightest people of his kingdom look stupid? He decided to go around the city in disguise to try and catch them. As he walked near the city gates, he found a man sitting there with a heap of mango, waiting someone to buy them. The fruit seller had chosen loneliest spot, so the king was suspicious. "Why are you selling your fruits here?" he asked. The fruit seller was actually third disciple Umesh. He pretended to look nervous around and answered in a whisper, "Sir, I have heard that some clever cheats are roaming around the kingdom, wanting to cheat us and our clever king. I have heard one will be walking by this way, so I am waiting there hoping to catch him and deliver him to the king." The king was surprised that this person knew all about the clever gang of cheats. "Have you seen him before?" "Yes, sir, I know the gang. The person who is coming today is the chief." "What does he look like?" "He is tall, hefty, and very cruel." "Is there any way I can see him?" the king asked excitedly. "Sir, the best way is to hide. As soon as he comes, I will whistle and you can see him." But that spot, there was neither a tree nor any rock behind which king could hide. The fruit seller held out a sack. "Hide in this, sir," he suggested. "I will keep you next to me and anyone will think it's a sack of mango." The king agreed, hopped into the sack. Quickly, Umesh tied it and walked away laughing. The king soon realized he had been tricked too, but he was tied in the sack and could do nothing. Many hours later, when his soldier came looking for him, he managed to wriggle around the sack and attract their attention. How embarrassed he was to set free by them. He also knew that he and his people of kingdom were not clever as he boasted. He realized his mistake. The king's old teacher came to the court and explained how his three students had tricked everyone. Harish, Mahesh, and Umesh apologized for their actions, and the king promised to rule his kingdom with wisdom and humility. Story number 20. The Story of Silk. No sooner had the children gotten over their excitement of the visit to Rahmat Chacha's house than Ajji sprung another surprise. There was a wedding in the village. Having attended some village weddings earlier, the children knew what to expect. Here, it was not like the city where you went at a certain time printed on the card, gave your present, ate, and came back. In the village, everyone was invited, whether your name was on a card or not. And not only you were expected to come as early as possible, you were also expected to pitch in and help the host. So Damu was rushing off in the jeep to pick the guests from the railway stations. Rahmat Chacha was in charge of providing fresh vegetable from his farm. Ajji was herding a group of women into the kitchen and telling them what to do. Ajja was supervising and cleanliness and had stocked up on big bottle of phenyl and other cleaners. And Vishnu Kaka was dressed in his best, most spotless dhoti and kurta and was looking after the guests. Ajji told the children to wear their nicest clothes and come to the venue. Krishna, always careful of the way she looked, wore her pretty blue silk frock. Ajji noticed and said, Krishna, remember to be careful. There will be a lot of people and food here. Don't get your clothes dirty. Krishna promised to be careful. Soon Ajji disappeared into the kitchen, which was lined with people chopping and stirring and cooking. Outside, guests were pouring in. Vishnu Kaka was making sure everybody was served with breakfast. Ajja was seen hurrying through about the bottle of phenyl in his hand. Rahmat Chacha was taking care of the flower decorations while Pirambi Chachi was stirring piles of garland. Children were playing all over the place, film songs played on the mic, and there was happy chaos everywhere. After the wedding, during the lunchtime, while eating sweet pancakes of chiroti and badam milk, someone jostled Krishna and a big puddle of milk fell on her dress. She was grief-stricken. Ajji consoled her. Don't cry. Silk can be washed and made to look just like new. That is the wonderful thing about it. Seeing Krishna's tear-stained face, she said, Today, when we will go home, I will tell you the story of how silk was made for the first time. That made Krishna happy. That night, though Ajji was tired, she still told the children the story of silk. Did you know that silk was discovered in China? A long time ago, in a tiny village in China, there lived a poor girl belonging to a weaver's family. One day, the emperor was passing through the village and saw her walking in the fields. He noticed her red cheeks and rosebud-like mouth, her proud bearing, and her rough, work-worn hands, which means she worked very hard through the year. He immediately fell in love with her and, though she was much older, decided to marry her. The girl married the ruler of the land and went to live in the palace as his beloved queen. But she was unhappy. She had grown up in the wide open spaces of the countryside, and now she was confined to a palace, magnificent though it was. She was used to working from dawn to night without a moment's rest, but she had many servants to take care of her needs and did not know how to fill her time. In the village, she had been surrounded by a family and her friends who had exchanged news and gossip as they worked, but in the palace it was quiet and no one spoke out of turn. The emperor was noticed, his new wife was sad and tried his best to make her happy. He brought her grand clothes, jewels, and artifacts, threw elaborate parties, hired the best musicians of the land to amuse her. Yet she was sad. One afternoon, the empress sat under the mulberry bush in her garden, lost in her thought about her village. She slowly sipped a hot water from a cup. Staring up at the blue sky, the girl remembered the birds flew over her village. Then, sighing softly to herself, she picked her cup and took another sip. But what was this? A cocoon from the mulberry bush had dropped into hot water. Her first thought was to throw away the water and the cocoon. But then, she took a closer look and saw some thread peeping out from the cocoon. Where had they come from? She pulled the thread. They were thin, strong and shiny. She kept pulling and pulling until a long line of thread came out. Now the empress had a great idea. She would take thread from many cocoons and weave it soft, strong cloth from it. She called her servants and everyone got to work. They took cocoons out from mulberry bush and dropped them in hot water and removed the thread. They gathered a fair amount of yarn. Then the queen ordered a special weaving machine and wove the best piece of cloth using this thread. Thus, silk was the best and brightest form of cloth was weaved. The manufacture of silk spread through China. It was the cloth that only royalty can wear and was much in demand in lands as far away as Rome. The route through which silk was traded between China and Europe through Asia was called Silk Route. Now that Chinese had learned how to make silk cloth, they did not want to share this knowledge with anyone in the world. Generation of Chinese royalty were sworn never to reveal the secret to anyone. When princesses got far away and married, they were not allowed to tell anyone in their home how silk was made. Many years later, when a clever princess was leaving her house on getting married, her bags were searched carefully to check that she did not carry anything that would help her make silk. This princess had been weaving silk from a young age and wanted to continue to do so wherever she went. She had hidden the cocoons in her long, elaborate hairdo. No one thought of looking there. When she went to her husband's house, she took out these cocoons from her hair and started gathering silk thread. In this way, legend goes, the knowledge how to make silk left China. Story 21. When Yama called. One day, Ajji was sitting and stitching a tear in an old sari. When the children came and sat around her, the holidays were finishing and they did not want to be away from her for even a minute. Meenu and Krishna affectionately put their arms around Ajji's neck and said, Ajji, why do you have so many wrinkles on your hand? Because I'm old, said Ajji. Why do old people have wrinkles? Asked Meenu. Ajji took off her glasses, which she wore only when sewing or reading, and said, Once upon a time, I was also young like you. My skin was smooth and shiny, my hair was long and black. I had a very sharp eyes and an excellent memory. But as I grew older, everything changed slowly. We will all grow old like this one day, shan't we? Asked Divya. Yes, every living beings get old. It is the part of life. Come, I will tell you a story about old age. The story. Many years ago, there lived in a little town a man named Arun. He was a merchant and, though not very rich, he lived comfortably enough. He had a large family of brothers and sisters, wife and children. He looked after them well, and in whatever way he could, he also helped out the poor people in the town. He built rest houses for travelers. In these, there were dining halls where anyone could come and have a good, wholesome meal for very little money. One day, while returning home from work, he happened to pass one such rest house. It had veranda where people stopped and rested. Sitting there, looking tired and hungry, was a stranger. He was there, a tall man. His clothes were travel-stained and showed that he had come afar. With him was his horse, looking as tired and as hungry as its master. Seeing them, Arun's kind heart melted and he went up to speak to the man. Where have you come from, my brother? He asked. Why don't you step inside for a hot meal and some rest? The man looked up, gave a smile and said, The rest house is very popular. There is no room for me and the dining hall is full too. I will wait here for a while, then I will be on my way. I am sure I will find another place to serve me food down the road. Arun was not here of this. The thought of someone going away without food and rest was too much for him. He insisted the man coming back to his house with him. There he invited the traveler to share a meal with his family. The man was served lovingly and ate his fill. While he was eating, the man noticed that Arun was sometimes a bit absent-minded. If was it something was on his mind and he was worried. Once they had finished eating and washed up, the traveler rose to leave. He thanked Arun for his kindness and then said, If you don't mind me asking, sir, I could not help you notice that you are a bit worried. I know I am a stranger to you, but perhaps it would help lighten to your burden if you share your worries with me. But Arun only smiled and shook his head. He did not want to share his thought with the stranger. Then the man said, Perhaps if I show you who really I am, you will confide in me. And in a trice, the man changed. He was no longer a tired traveler, but a god resplendent in shimmering clothes with a crown on his head. His horse changed into a buffalo, and the man introduced himself. I am Yama, the Lord of Death. Now will you tell me what's wrong? Seeing this, Arun nearly fainted. The Lord of Death has just shared a meal with him. What are you doing on earth, my lord? He gasped. Yama said, Oh, I like coming here once in a while and seeing what everyone is doing. So, what's bothering you? Arun replied, You see, I need to grow my business more, but today I was not feeling very well. If anything happened to me, who will look like after my large family? Yama nodded seriously. Don't worry, child, he comforted. I have seen what a hard-working, kind-hearted person you are. You invited me home and let me have a meal with you, knowing me only to be a tired and weary traveler. I will do one thing when it's time for leave to you from the earth. Come with me, like all living things have to do one day. I will not come all of a sudden. I will let you know many days in advance so you can prepare yourself and your affairs for the time you have to go away with me. Arun bowed to the Lord in gratitude when he heard this, and Yama vanished. Years went by. Arun became an old man. His business had grown many times over. His children and brothers, sisters were all looked after. He had few worries left. One night, he went to bed and had a dream. He saw Yama standing in front of him. Yama was holding out a hand towards him and said, Come, it's a time to go for you with me. Arun was terrified. But Lord, you had promised that you would tell me in days advance before I would die. How can I come right away now? A small smile appeared on Yama's lips. But child, I did give you a warning. I made your hair turn white. I made your back stoop with the age. I made your teeth fall out one by one. These were all indications that your time is coming to an end. But these things happen to every man and woman. How could this be a warning only for me? Yama nodded. Yes, they do happen to everyone. And when they do, men and women should start getting ready to meet me. Life has to come to an end. There is no escape. Arun now understood. He looked back on his days and realized that even without meaning to, he had been preparing for this. His children looked after his business and all work was done. There was nothing stopping from going away with his old friend Yama. He climbed on the buffalo behind Yama. Let's go, he said, and off Yama went away with him. Story number 22, the last unending story. Today, Ajja and Ajji and Vishnu Kaka were all feeling sad. The children's holiday were nearly over and it was nearing time when they would go back to their homes. For 3 weeks, when they would go back from 3 weeks, the house had echoed with their laughter, games and quarrel. Now all would be quiet once again till they returned for the next holiday. The children too were feeling sad and had gathered around their grandparents in a tight little group. Raghu the eldest said, We had more fun in this holiday than we ever had, even more than when we visited Disneyland, and it was all because of stories. Ajja said, When I was still a school teacher, I always found it was so much easier to get to my students' attention when I told them the lessons form of stories. Anand said, I find it really boring to read history from a book, but if you tell us the stories from history, I'm sure we will remember everything. Everyone now turned their bright eyes on Ajji. How can you tell us only one story even on this last day, Ajji? We want more, they clamored. But Ajji shook her head and said, If you only eat pickles and laddus, will you be healthy? Stories are like that. You can't spend all of your time listening to the stories. Then it will be boring, like the unending story that a king once wanted to hear. The story. I want a story, and that's an order, shouted King Pratap Singh of Mayanagar. King Pratap was only 15 years old and still a boy at heart. He didn't like being king much because he was supposed to be steering things like keeping the law, listening to his people's problem and all kinds of deary things like that. The only part liking about being a ruler was that everyone had to obey him. How he loved giving orders and making all kinds of demands. And what he loved most was listening stories. Every day he insisted on listening to at least 10 stories. All the storytellers in his kingdom lined up at his court. They told him funny stories, scary stories, magical stories, and anything else that came into their mind. King Pratap listened to all with rapt attention. He loved stories and storytellers so much that whenever he had a good tale, he would shower teller with gold, silver, and all kind of wonderful presents. His minister sighed and said and tried to explain, "Your Majesty, stories are all very well, but you should be listening to them after your work is done. Your people need you to do so many things for them. If you spend all your time wrapped around in fantasies, how will the land prosper?" But King Pratap paid no attention. It was the stories he wanted and stories he would get. But how long could people provide him with stories? Soon the tales began to dry out. Some tried to cleverly tell him once they related long back, but Pratap was sharp as a needle. "I've heard that one. Off with his head for repeating a story." Oh, how his minister had to plead with him to pardon the culprit. Finally, disgusted with all storytellers in his land, the king announced, "I want some to tell me a story that will go on till I ask him to stop. Anyone who can do this will get half more of my kingdom as a prize." His ministers were more horrified at this. Half of the kingdom to some woolly-headed writer and teller of stories. How horrible! They all tried to show the king the foolishness of his ways, but he was adamant. A story that lasted for days, even weeks, was that he wanted, and that was that. Soon a long line of men and women appeared at his court. Each one wanted to win the big prize, but none of the stories were good enough for the king. "Boring!" he shouted at some. "Rubbish!" he yelled at others. "Cock and bull!" he bellowed at yet others. Meanwhile, work on his kingdom affairs had come to a stop. All ministers were sitting, wringing their hands and wondering how to bring back the king to solving all important issues. Finally, the chief minister, who was the wise and clever, had an idea. The next day, a scruffy, crazy-looking man turned up at court. His hair was in a mess, his clothes were in half-torn, on his feet he wore shoes from which his toes stuck out. He marched upon the palace and demanded to be given an audience with the king. The guard sighed and let him in. They were used to having all kind of character turning up at the gates wanting to tell the stories to the king. The old man admitted into the king's chamber that he made himself comfortable, drank a huge jug of water, and without introducing himself, started his stories. This story begins in a humble farmer's field. The farmer had toiled days and weeks of months to grow a bumper crop of sugarcane. He sold the sugarcane to the nearby sugar factory and they made sacks and sacks of sugar out of it. Everyone was so happy. All this sugar would be sold in that market and make everyone rich. That year their children would get the nice clothes, their stores would be filled of food, and their wives would be very happy with them. Now all that sugar had to be stored and kept carefully till the sacks could be taken to the market to sell. The factory people poured the sugar into many sacks and lugged them into the storeroom. In the storeroom, who would you find but a colony of ants? They had decided that the building of their house near such a ready supply of the favorite food was a very good idea, and they were always on the lookout for new batches of sugar to be stored there. No sooner had the sacks been kept than the lines of ants marched up to them. They found a little hole to make them their way in the first, and first ant went into the bag of sugar and took one sugar crystal and went back. Next ant went into the bag and took a crystal and returned home. Another went into the bag and took a crystal and returned home. Yet another went into the bag and returned into the home. So on and on the storyteller droned. King Pratap found he had nearly dozed off. The day had passed and he was still listening to the same story. "Stop, stop!" he ordered. "I will listen to the rest of the story tomorrow." The next morning, the old man turned up as usual, started from where he had left of the previous day. "Yesterday I was telling you how the ants came and picked the sugar. Now the next ant went toward the bag of sugar and took a crystal. Another went, took a sugar crystal and returned home as another ant." The story went on and on like this. Lunch and dinner passed by, but nothing happened. By now King Pratap was bursting with rage. How dare anyone tell him such a boring story? "What kind of this?" he complained. "What will happen next? What happened to the farmer?" But the old man only smiled and said, "Have patience, your majesty. That year the yield was good and 1,000 bags of sugar. I have to tell you how the aunt collected the sugar. Oh, stop, stop! Pratap shouted. Stop this boring story at once. Now the man stood up and said, Fine, if you are ordering me to stop, I have won the prize. Give me half of your kingdom. The king was in dilemma now. He had announced a competition and prize, no doubt, but could he honestly give half of it the kingdom to this crazy looking storyteller with his boring tales? As he sat pondering, the man grinned even wider and took off his dirty robe, rubbed off the dirt from his face, and shook his back with his shaggy white hair. Everyone was astonished. Why, this was the chief minister himself. Don't worry, Your Majesty, the minister told that overjoyed the king. I did not want you half of the kingdom. I only want to show you how you were wrong and neglected your work and listened to stories night and day. Your people deserve a good king and someone who will work hard to look after them and someone who will think of his own happiness only once his people are happy. That's what good kings do, not just giving order and enjoying yourself. Poor Pratap looked shamed at this, yet, yes, he had been extremely selfish king. From now on, story time was only at night after his work was done. So that was how the summer holidays ended. Everyone packed their bags and reached the station. Their mother has came to take them back home. Ajja, Ajji, Vishnu Kaka, Damu, Rahmat Chacha, everyone had come to see them off. No one felt like leaving Ajji's side and Meenu kept hugging her till she had to board the train. Soon the train puffed out of the station. The children leaned out to wave a goodbye. Slowly Shigon got left behind, but the children would continue to remember their Ajja and Ajji and everyone else and all the stories which would remain with them forever, and they would be back during the next summer holidays when they would hear so many more stories. Thank you for listening my audiobook. If you want any other story books or any book, do comment on the comment box and I will make that. Maybe next book I will make any book I can make. So keep listening and thank you. Happy reading and listening. Bye bye.